Here's a really good example of a finished finger painted can. Remember to hydrate your paints with a mister. Keep them hydrated so that they'll work easily. I'm starting to put in the highlights, so a little bit of white into my structure. Now I'm working on shadows. You're going to keep building up the drawing using darks, using lights. Some of what I'm using is a light violet or a brownish color. Don't worry if your colors start mixing and you get other colors. We don't want to see just a red can. We want to see a red can that has highlights and shadows. Right now I'm putting in a shadow and it's too dark. So I'm going to mix right on top of it. I'm going to put some white paint on top, and while it's wet, I'm going to mix it and lighten that color so it shows more of the reflection that I'm seeing while I'm looking at the Diet Coke can. Here I'm putting some shadows on the side. The can is three-dimensional. It's a cylinder, so it's going to have shadows on the edges and it's going to have shadows throughout. So the Q-tip we're going to use in just a little bit to get more linear marks. But right now what we're trying to do is just kind of put in a gesture of what we see. It's going to be very loose marks. But again, remember, don't get too much paint on your finger. Too much paint on your finger and you won't have very much control with pushing it around. Sometimes you need to work the background. So right there, I'm adding color to the background. And that's going to help with creating the edge. If you can't really see the edge, or if your edge has gotten a little large, you can do the background as well. A lot of times what I do when I pick up a color and I'm wanting to make another area darker, I will use that color and then keep layering it. So the more you layer, the more your colors will get richer. That can is crushed a little bit, so I'm trying to create that edge so that diagonal mark kind of helps give me that idea that it's crushed. All right, now I'm going to go in with the Q-tip. I'm going to start adding some highlights because the rim is very bright, so I'm adding some just straight white on top. Anywhere I see a bright highlight, I want to add more white. I'm also going to use the Q-tip for the darker shadows too, so I'll probably use the other side of it. I'm building up the background some as I go so I can see the edge of the can better. Right there you can see I accented the curve with a little bit of darker value. And in the back of the rim, I'm starting to add more shadow too. Your background can be a lot of different things. Okay, so I just added white to make the tab, and I'm adding a little bit more color inside the tab. As that starts to dry, I can add some shadow around it as well. So you're building up the shadows and you're building up the highlights. And now I'm starting to add the lettering on the can. Remember that the lettering is curving around the can. So your lettering is not flat. It also has dimension because it is circling around the can. The C at that one spot has a little bit of an indentation, so I'm kind of blurring it out a little bit, and I'll work to build up that crinkled look a little bit more. But you can see that the lettering looks like it's curving around the can, just like the curve above it. I'm putting in some hot highlights, so that means just some pure white in some spots. And I'm just going to start working more and more on the background. We're going to be using the squeegees too, which will help with creating the background. If you decide that you want your can to be like sitting on grass, then that kind of gives you a color scheme that you want to use. Okay, so some of you asked about mixing a brown color. So I took some yellow and I took some of the warm red, and now I've added a little bit of blue, which is the complement. I'm adding more yellow and I'm adding more warm red. And so you can see I'm starting to get the brown color. So if you're wanting to do the Dr. Pepper can, then that probably just means that there's more of the warm red. I added white to it. This is another can that I've worked on before, so I wanted to show you what the brown looks like. This is a Sprite can. So there are different degrees of browns, just like there's different degrees of yellows. So this brown is more of a kind of a tan brown. So if I wanted to make a background that looked kind of like a fence line or just a wooden, if I wanted, I could easily, if I wanted the foreground underneath the can to look like something wooden, then I'd want to use the browns too. So right there, I added a little bit more red to the brown to make it more of a reddish brown. So that's how you make brown. Here's the finished one that I started today. I'll talk more about using the squeegee in the background, but you should have a nice painting that is similar to the can that you're looking at. And again, the background is more abstract.